It is what's becoming a weekly crossover edition of Locked On Big 12 and Locked On Pac 12. Will Pac 12 football replace Tucker Carlson on Fox? Is that where Pac 12 football is heading? We'll talk about that on today's show. No, we'll talk about Colorado kind of as a television product and also like just really odd spot. And, I think with the conference in transition, with who their coach is, a team in transition, all of those things. So kind of attacking Colorado from a bunch of different angles. And then also conversation about the college football playoff. And the Pac 12, the Big 12, the two conferences, are they with the ACC and expecting hopefully two teams a year? Are they going to be more of a most years one, sometimes two? What's it going to look like? We're going to break that down and share some thoughts on it. I'm Josh Neighbors of Locked On Big 12. Spencer McLaughlin is here of Locked On Pac 12. And we have to start where everybody is starting. It's been pretty quiet, recently on the realignment news front. Spencer, hearing anything recently? How are you doing? Do you feel okay? Are you worried about? I know this Comcast thing also is looming as well too.
Yeah.
How are Pac-12 fans? How are we doing right now?
Yeah, I've been trying to move into the spring football phase because we just kind of I think are in the waiting game for the media deal. Stuart Mandel hinted the timeline would be sometime end of May, early June, which we've discussed before, makes some sense and is discouraging on the other hand and whatnot. The only recent piece of news for those who are more on the Locked On Big 12 side of things, the Chancellor Phil DiStefano of University of Colorado, or as we know them, CU. But I was corrected by somebody that's the University of Colorado. But fun fact, apparently, according to one random YouTube commenter and it seems correct, they don't go by UC, they go by CU so that no one confuses them with the UC school system. Kind of makes sense.
Fair enough.
He was being chatty, as we've had some administrators and athletic directors do and presidents over the last couple of months. He had chirp, 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 chirp. And he was asked about many of things, including realignment, and reiterated what I've said on my show for months, which is nobody wants to leave. And I think you've been fair with this as well. Nobody wants to leave. And he also did throw in kind of the Robert Robbins line of no one is doing anything. No one is wanting to go anywhere. No one is chatting about, going to the Big 12. No one's chatting about breaking off from the Pac-12. No one's going to do anything until we see what the media deal actually is. And I suspect for a guy who also in those comments mentioned the academic component, which has a stronger future for Colorado in the Pac-12 than the Big 12 for reasons I've also outlined on my show for the last several months or so. I don't see him as being in a mindset where he'd say, oh, I could get $3 million more a year in the Big 12. I'm going to go over there and that's the best interest like that. Now you can criticize that move, think, no, that's not the right thing for athletics. That's not the best thing to do, all that sort of stuff. But I'm just trying to relay here what these presidents are communicating and what they are thinking. And I think President Robbins, who had the direct quote down in Arizona, the president down there, why would we change conferences for a few $1 million a year more? So if you're the Pac-12 in terms of striking a dollar figure that's not going to, kind of continue to drive the social media mostly driven train of our school is going to jump to the Big 12, you just have to get within striking distance of the Big 12 there. And I feel like they can do that. And, Apple is getting talked about more and more as time goes on here. I've long wanted Amazon because they have a bigger subscriber base. So I feel like you could get more people there. But at the end of the day, it's a tough balancing act for George Kliavkoff in the Pac-12 right now. How do you value streaming, limited exposure, so to speak? And we don't know what that could be in the future. We just kind of know what it is right now. But even right now, we don't really know because they don't put out those numbers super publicly and whatnot. How do you value that versus actual dollar figures, right? That's, I think, the balance that George Kliavkoff is trying to strike, in addition to figure out who the media partners are actually going to end up being, getting people back to the table maybe, or introducing new players to the table. I think the timeline going out to, May or June allows for the possibility of someone who we haven't discussed or heard anything about either in a long time or ever in these talks with all the rumors that have gone about. I think it leaves open the possibility of basically starting from ground zero with somebody there. But I'm in the same kind of headspace I was last time we talked, where it's like it's the same. It's like they're looking for a deal. I feel like they're going to get one, and they're going to use as much time as they possibly can to find the best deal that they can get, whatever that looks like.
Hey everyone, quick word from our sponsors, the FanDuel Sportsbook. It is America's #1 sportsbook. It is so easy to use. It's even easier to sign up. You guys can go there now, FanDuel.com/locked on. When you guys do, you can get up to $1,000 back on your first bet in free bets if your bet does not hit. And you guys can bet on the NBA playoffs right now. They've got Dinger Tuesdays if you guys want to bet on Major League Baseball. They've got futures for things like the NFL draft, for next year's college football season. It's all happening at the FanDuel Sportsbook. They've got same game parlays. They have got prop bets. You guys can bet overs and unders on, Austin Reeves points in Lakers game number 5. All of those things. FanDuel.com/locked on today to sign up. And once again, do not miss your chance at a no sweat first bet up to $1,000 back in free bets if your first bet misses. FanDuel.com/locked on. FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. Yep, and we are approaching May now. It's Tuesday, April 25th, as we are recording this. Yeah, I think the couple constants, once again, we've both mentioned it, they want to stay, right? And we don't think that a few $1 million is going to get them to leave. But, it's a combination of things, right? I think using PEMDAS, if those of you school, right, the parentheses, it's almost like the streaming and linear are kind of in their own little parentheses thing. And I guess you could also just call that maybe just exposure, right? Maybe that's the right word, just to kind of make it all one nice, neat thing. And then the outside of that is dollar value, right? So it's the exposure versus the dollar value conversation that's there. Any conversation about the future of the conference is really just, it's about those things. But like people, and I've brought this up, the lack of security is it's something you have to question there too. With Oregon and Washington, being two, but you have to think, like two big brands like that, they've seen other schools jump. Like if there is an opportunity at all, even if it's for Baller Park,
for the Big Ten, yeah,
right. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. Yes, you worry about the long-term health of the conference there with that. So I think we're kind of in the same headspace. We've been there, and kind of May as the deadline. That's kind of how we are, moving forward here. I don't know about new players involved. Obviously, I think the big thing, I think it's going to be ESPN, maybe even Fox jumps back in, although there's no reporting. It says that they're there right now, but it could be opportunity there. Apple, Amazon, we're kind of in the same place. One thing that's been brought up this week, Spencer, and recently too, is Colorado as a television property. Now, I know that, George Kliavkoff, and he should have done this. He said that Colorado definitely having Deion Sanders would help, it helps as a television property. What else is he going to say? He shouldn't say it hurts, right?
Yeah. Well, and it does help
in the short term, but not. Yeah. But the problem with that is that there's no.
It helps not in
a television contract negotiation.
Yeah, in the grand scheme of things, it's like
because here's the thing. The only thing that we can guarantee with Deion Sanders, and look, I don't think he's going to be there just for 1 year, but the only thing that we can guarantee is that he will coach Colorado this year, right? I guess nothing in life is guaranteed, but like the one thing that we know for sure is Deion Sanders will coach Colorado football in 2023. Yes. They will be in the Pac-12 conference. Besides that, like we don't really know what the deal is going to be with him. And so I think it is, I think this has been basically widely talked about, but I'm of the mind that while it'll be great this year, and I think great for television ratings, it could be curious. Number one, they have to win. Like if they're like mid, they use the term the kid used, mid, and I think mid for them would be like 4-8, 5-7, considering how bad the program has been.
If you get over 3 wins, it's a great year.
I don't know about that. I don't know about 3 wins, anything over 3. They're not Kansas football.
But their schedule is brutally tough. Also, do you know how many winning seasons Colorado's had in their last 17 years? It's 2.
The last 10. I think it's 1. Right, the one Mike Mack.
No, it's 2 in the last. But one of them was a COVID year, so that doesn't really count. So
right. Really, it's 6 games or whatever.
Really, it's 1.
So as a television property, they don't add much, but like they are a really fascinating story because they could end up, there's a chance they could end up in either league, and they've got a coach that is going to make their program better, no doubt about it. But there's so much volatility with like how long is he going to be there, and we're seeing roster turnover on a scale that I'm not sure we've ever seen before at a school. I mean, I'm reading an athletic article right now from Max Olson, 18 players in the portal, 11 in an hour. I think the first day they had 18 jump. We knew Deion Sanders promised it. It's almost just staggering to see it happen in real time.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not that surprised by it. I mean, he came in, and one of the first, kind of public viewpoints we saw of Deion Sanders was him talking to a team of current Colorado football players and basically saying, "You guys weren't very good. You're not going to be here next year. Get out." I mean, that was one of the first things we saw, and
which I thought was really a bad idea on his part, but still.
I don't think
I think there's some talent. There's got to be some talent evaluation, and we also know the best thing you can do in this sport is add depth. And so you can't tell me that there aren't some. If they study the tape, there aren't some diamonds in the rough that could have been rotational
on last
guys
year's
for
Colorado team.
But here's the thing: you have to build not just your front line; you have to build your second and third lines. And I'm sure there's some guys who could have at least been replacement level guys, replacement level people. Like somebody's hurt,
probably. But those are going to be a dime a dozen and really easy for Deion Sanders to get because he's Deion Sanders and the transfer portal being what it is now. So they've had all these. I think the most surprising was Montana Lamonius Craig. Who I talked about on yesterday's show as being a great candidate to go to USC or UCLA. He's from Inglewood, and both those coaches know offense and they throw the ball. So I think that could be a fit down there, and I would certainly watch for that, though he'd be a fit at a number of Pac-12 schools. But I think with all the guys leaving, it's easy to paint the picture of, oh my gosh, things are suddenly going wrong. What is happening here? Colorado's in a tailspin. Look, Deion said, it's fodder for people who can't stand Deion Sanders and want him to fail every day from now until the end of time with everything he touches on a football field as a coach, specifically in the Pac-12 conference and whatnot. But I don't see it as a major obstacle, because if you're telling me that more guys are leaving the program, okay, what exactly did they have from last year that you really want to hold on to? Right. I'm like, there was nothing about that team. They had the worst offense in the Pac-12. They had, I'm pretty sure, the worst defense in the Pac-12. Everything was a mess. Like, the only thing that could have been worse is if they hadn't beaten Cal, a game they should have lost, by the way, and gone 0-12. That's the only thing that could have been worse. So if you're telling me there's more turnover from last year, and now they've had a couple, I think, decommitments on the recruiting trail as well. So Colorado is now like every other program, right? You look at the Colorado now and say, well, they're trying to rebuild. They need to add these guys. They got to bring in. They've already brought in a bunch of players. I saw something the other day. They've added, I think, 29 transfers and had 29 transfers away from the program. That's good, because you need to start fresh. You need to completely start over if you're Colorado. There's nothing about last year's team you want to hold on to. You want to go in and you want to be there you want to go forward if you're Deion Sanders and the Buffs with guys who want to be there. You don't want guys who are, 1 foot in, 1 foot out, half want to be there, half don't, and whatnot. That's not what it takes, right? Even with Coach Prime, there's still a lot of work to be done at Colorado, and you have to have guys who are all in on establishing a culture there. And Coach Prime's at the center of it, but players are going to make that up at the end of the day. So if you have guys who are hesitant about playing time or who want to hit the portal, want to play more, not sure about Coach Prime and whatnot, fine. I think that's totally fine. And when you get as down as Colorado has been for as long as they have been down, for a team that was back in the 90s, by the way, near the top of college football. I mean, I'm pretty sure they have a national championship. Back in the 90s, they went to major bowl games. They were conference champion. Like, they were really good, and they have just completely obliterated that institutional brand respect. So I think Deion Sanders coming in and ruffling feathers and having guys leave who don't want to be there and whatnot, I think that's a good thing for Colorado.
Yeah, I was just more on the trail of. I mean, it's staggering, right? 46 transfers. They had 20 remaining scholarship players from the school. They got 83 scholarships. They had 20 remaining as of Monday night. Look, I'm not saying wholesale
staggering, but it's good.
Oh, I'm with you. My more point to the message was like, look, if you do a deep dive, you cannot tell me, and look, there's now 20 guys still on the roster. You can't tell me there were a few guys to be like, look, if we actually gave him the correct coaching, this guy could help us in some ways. There are definitely some of those guys. That was my point with the look, like, you don't need to make a blanket statement. You know what I mean? And I'm sure he talks to some of the guys individually and whatnot. I just think it is, it's funny because I think the end of the line, we see him in the southeast part of the country. I think that's that's not an unfair thing to say. That is where he's from.
Mm-hmm.
I believe the way he is going to do things, no matter how he does things, I'm going to be very careful what this is going to be received differently there than it will be here. Even if this works, I think there will be a fair amount of folks that if he goes to the Southeastern Conference, they might say, well, this ain't the Pac-12. It's not gonna, and look, it's not. It's a bit different. But who's saying that he couldn't curtail a roster? So it's very odd. And I've seen this circle a lot recently. There was a lot of anti-Deion Sanders sentiment coming up. And I've been very...
Oh, I see it. I'm
very,
all the time.
very curious about why this is all. Because here's the thing. I think he's good. I actually think he's good for the sport. I think it's nice to have coaches that don't do don't do stuff. A lot of times I feel like a lot of these coaches are super insincere, right? Mm-hmm. He very much himself, right? This is kind of always who we've known Deion Sanders to be. And I enjoy that about him. So I'm just fascinated by this. And Colorado is so interesting in their football future because they've got a conference that they joined, recently and have not had very much success in. There is a chance, albeit however small you think it is, they could go back to a conference they were in before. All the while they have this like transcendent, maybe the most charismatic head coach that we've seen in the last, 20, 30 years in college football. Or maybe,
I guess he's up there. I don't.
As a singular character, he's got to be one of the more intriguing folks that we've seen. And kind of the quantity of the unknown. I mean, the story is a fantastic, all while trying to turn around, like you mentioned, what had been a very historic program. They are in this unbelievably bizarre spot for a program. Like the ground beneath them is shaking, and in a lot of ways it's exciting, but also I think it could be scary for some fans just because, oh my God, where are we playing our football games?
But here's the other thing, and you touched on it in the myriad of points that you made, most of which I agree with, by the way. He is at some level just inherently good for the sport.
Yeah. Oh, I think on most levels, he's good.
Every story needs good villains. And I think Deion Sanders, frankly, is an intriguing type of villain for some people because you'll have people who get in his camp and you'll have people who are firmly on the other side. And I'm here for all of it. I talk about this on my radio show all the time. I absolutely love Dylan Brooks going out and talking smack to LeBron James. I'm so here for it, right? I'm not here for shots below the belt. That's when we're crossing the line and whatnot. But the NBA, I think for a while, they've had a big ratings decline. I think they need people who kind of get fans riled up a bit, right? Whether it's genuine or not, I think it is with these guys. But the Draymond Greens, the Dylan Brookses of the world, they make it more enticing, right? Every time Draymond Green and Domantas Sabonis are going one-on-one in the game, I can't look anywhere else. I can't look anywhere else, right? Or look at Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark. If you told me right now, Josh, Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark play tomorrow, that's must-see television. It's must-watch TV. And we've had this over the years, right? Old school Red Sox and Yankees, Duke and North Carolina basketball, like all these great rivalries had guys.
But who is going to be, it's funny then, who is the foil, right? Who is kind of the other side of this? Now in college sports, like you can just be a villain.
I think it's just kind of everybody.
But so here's what's
or Matt Rule.
There you go. Yeah, it's actually very fair. Yeah. So my issue with Deion, I have not loved the way he is. I didn't love the way he spoke to the team because I'm like, I'd seem short-sighted once again. I believe any roster, if you develop guys right, like you can find some gems. I also haven't loved the way that he's treated the media, right? Like saying you have to call me Coach Prime. Would you call Nick Saban Nick is just wrong. Like the entire reporting room at all the reporters at Alabama call him Nick. So, I think that's going to be really fascinating to watch is how he handles the media because he is himself, sure, but also too, as you move up the ranks, like at Jackson State, a lot of the folks who are covering you, it's so great for HBCU football to have him there. And, you can maybe put up with some other things because of that. Like, and he's great for college football, generally speaking as well too, but just make sure that you are, respecting the folks in the media as well, because if they turn on you, it can be much more difficult. So those relationships are very, very important. And it can be much more difficult to get the folks in town on your side if the
Well,
folks, who are involved in a lot of the situations
what?
are not in your corner.
Okay,
So
here's what I'll say to that. Many people know I'm even rocking a State of Oregon shirt today, but I'm an Oregon Duck fan. Have been my entire life. When Chip Kelly
I
was
knew you were going to go. I knew you were going this
Yeah, when
direction.
when when
I knew you were
Chip
going this.
Kelly
Yeah.
burst onto the scene as Oregon's
Right.
head coach, it got off to that rocky start and then some with LeGarrette Blount and the punch at Boise State and everything, and there were questions about him. But as he became kind of this star in college football, because it was look at what Oregon's doing. They're going faster than everybody else. They've got flashy uniforms. They've got big facilities. Like, oh my gosh, Oregon was a team that everybody wanted to be. And Chip Kelly, at the face of it, he was not the media's best friend all the time.
Yeah, but I wouldn't. He was more quirky than he was straight up combative at times.
Depending on the interview, I think yes, there's an introverted nature to Chip Kelly, and now it's not the same as it was. But back in that era, the media on the whole did not like him very much, right? Some people did, but he didn't give them a lot of information to go off of. He was the king of short answers. Like I honestly miss his going into halftime tunnel interviews with sideline reporters on the broadcast. They'd ask him these questions. What do you need to do to get your offense going? Well, we're fine. Well, you only put up 10 points in the first half. We're a second half ball club. We'll make some adjustments. We're good.
Right.
Right.
Deion's different from that. I will say too, in the individual interview settings, he's fantastic.
Yeah, no,
he's so good. And I think
whereas Chip was more still just kind of short, and he's like, right. I got to be here, I got to do this. I understand it.
All I'm asking for is just, and this maybe just maybe
I just want to go. I just want to go coach football and whatnot. But to what you said about if he gets too combative, is the Colorado fan base going to stay behind him? My answer with the Chip Kelly example is as long as you win games, you're fine. Winning cures all ills. They will put up with anything as long as you win games. And I think that he's going to be given that opportunity to, start winning football games. But if it doesn't go well, if we're in year 3 and they haven't gotten over 500, then that stuff will be a bigger talking point. Then that stuff will be, seemingly contributing to the noise, quote unquote, about does Deion need to be moved on from and all that sort of stuff. Because then people are looking for, right? So Russell Wilson's another good example. Russell Wilson won, and he was, a square. He was quirky. He was go Hawks. He was this corny kind of guy for a long, long time. People didn't care as much. Then once he started losing, it becomes something that media pundits and everyone and fans use as a metaphorical punching bag, right? Like he
got a bit weirder though. I love to say that.
I think you can say that. But again, he's always been kind of weird. He's always been that guy who's just very down the line and very boring. And is he really being authentic, or is he just kind of a character or whatever, and all that sort of stuff? That gets worse when you lose. But if you win, that noise is very, very quiet.
And I think once again, I think it was Rich Eisen, maybe the interview that he did where he talked about what kind of players he wanted. I forgot where it was. I might be wrong with that. Where he talked about what kind of players, like what kind of households he wanted guys from. And that was split. There were a lot of folks who didn't like the way he talked about it, but I think a lot of people said, hey, he's saying the quiet part out loud. And I think it was really interesting to hear somebody say that kind of stuff out loud. And I appreciate his candor. And I think that's really good for the sport because it's peeling back the onion in an impressive way. So, once again, unbelievably fascinating test case Deion Sanders is going to be wherever it's going to happen. And I think both Big 12 fans and Pac-12 fans deserve to have a lot of interest in what happens at that program moving forward. One thing we have to touch on is also the college ball playoff. And I guess we'll save a little bit of this for a different show because we went 20 some minutes here. But, the most interesting part about this television conversation, the Pac-12 and whatnot, is that as the Big Ten and SEC have begun to break away in terms of financial dollars and really just widening that gap now, it's almost like American Pharaoh here at the end of the Belmont. They're slapping that horse and it is kicking ass and taking names. It's funny because the access to the crown jewel in the sport has now been increased, right? 6 conferences now have a chance to go. And I believe it's a really interesting backdrop to this whole conversation because
and not have a chance. 6 conferences minimum every year will go to the college football playoff.
We'll go to the CFP every single year.
It's sick.
It's going to happen.
I know it's sick.
Well, I love that. I love that. I'm a huge fan of this.
Oh gosh, I can't stand it.
Right, that while the money gap is widening, the access to the CFP is it's widening too. It's kind of weird. These weird things. Do you think that's an interesting backdrop? Because I think we've mentioned access as a huge talking point here.
Yeah,
in the Pac-12.
Well, I think it's one reason. I'm not a fan of the 12-team playoff. If you want to come at me for that opinion, by all means. My Twitter handle is right down there. For those of you listening, at @Smalls_55. I will talk your ear off on why I feel that way with regards to college football. But I do think that there's real upside for the Pac-12, and that teams like Oregon and Washington are significantly more inclined to stay. Would they go to the Big Ten if an offer came? I believe yes. But I think they're more inclined, athletically speaking, to have 10 toes down in the Pac-12 because the 12-team playoff is there. Because if you're Oregon and Washington, right, Washington's a much better academic institution. They have a lot of other priorities. But for Oregon, it's their number one goal as a school is to win a national championship. Like that is what I know the president will say all that stuff, but that's what they're shooting for. That's what Uncle Phil wants. That's what he's put all this money into the program for. So if you're Oregon and Washington, you look at the Pac-12 and say, well, if we're going to add San Diego State and SMU, we're kind of the top dogs here, along with Utah and maybe Colorado or Oregon State, whoever. But we just have to win the conference to get an automatic slot there. That feels like a really viable option. But then getting into the playoff, if you don't win the conference championship in the Big 12 and the Pac-12, I don't think is going to be super easy, right? It's obviously more accessible than the 4-team model, where even a conference championship doesn't guarantee you a slot, which is something I was a fan of. But anyway, so I think that you look at what is the playoff going to actually look like, right? 6 highest rated conference champions. So we'll assume that's Power 5 and probably, I don't know, the American, right? Let's just say, for instance, which is getting a shakeup, but still is probably the best G, or the Mountain West, maybe. I don't know. Let's say you have your 6 highest rated conference champions in there, and it's the Power 5 and the Mountain West. Okay, so that's 6 slots gone, and only 1 school from the Big 12 and 1 school from the Pac-12 there. So now you're actually going for 6 at-large slots, which is not that different from what we currently have, which is going for 4 at-large slots. So the SEC is going to take at least 1 more. The Big Ten is going to take at least 1 more, right? I think we agree on that front. So now we're down to 4, and you're competing with other ACC schools. You're competing with other Big Ten and SEC schools. Like, is it out of the realm of possibility to say the SEC could send 4 teams to a 12-team playoff? I don't think so at all. I think that's pretty realistic, honestly. I think it'll be a minimum of 3 per year, and I think it'll be a maximum of 5. I could even, I don't know record-wise.
It's not going to be 6.
I don't think it'd be 6, but I think
4 is going to be tough too.
I don't think so. No.
Finding 2 teams that were excluded from
we almost had a 2-loss Bama team into a 4-team playoff this year, right? How many SEC teams would have made it in the 12-team playoff this year? You would have had Georgia. You would have had Alabama. You would have had Tennessee, at least.
Right. I think 4 is like, that's going to be probably where you sit, right? I know some folks probably would have wanted LSU, but LSU lost A&M. That would have not been tenable to me. You don't get to lose that.
But LSU, the other team, you're talking about a top 12,
right? 4 is possible, definitely possible. I think it's more difficult, kind of when when you really have to kind of make the decision, make it happen. But yeah, the 4 this year would have been, what is it? Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, and then I guess your last one would have been. Well, it would have been tough this year. They would have gotten 3 would have been this year. So yeah,
right.
So I'm saying
I think that's the minimum for the SEC.
Right.
So then
now, if LSU had beaten A&M, right, we're having a different conversation there.
Correct. Right. So you're one game away from maybe having 4 SEC teams in the playoff in a 12-team format in 2022. So I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility going forward. And I think for the Big 12 and the Pac-12, given that their conferences are significantly weaker without USC, UCLA, Oklahoma, and Texas in them, I think it's a pretty tough road. Like, I think 2 is the max. I think it's the absolute max. And frankly, I don't know if consistently both conferences could generate 1 at-large team in addition to their conference champion. I think combined, the max for the Big 12 and Pac-12 is 4. And I think it probably is more often 3 than it's 4.
I think the good news was last year you would have seen you would have seen 2 from both, right? You would have seen, and Washington ended up being a lot higher, in the end, but Utah and USC would have both been in there at the very end. And then for the Big 12, you would have seen
TCU.
Kansas State, obviously, and TCU both go. And then the year before, you would have seen Baylor and Oklahoma State. So it's possible, but we'll tackle this more later on. Spencer, where can people find you and your work and all of its variety?
I am at Smalls_55 on Twitter. I host Locked On Pac-12 and Locked On Ducks Monday through Friday on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can follow the shows on Twitter as well. And Josh, it is always fun to come on here and chop it up.
The banter is always great for you Pac-12 fans who are looking for some Big 12 talk. You guys can find us Locked On Big 12 wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube as well. Find me on Twitter at @JoshNeighbors_. You guys can find the show at LO Big 12. Spencer, likewise, it's always a pleasure, my man.
Always indeed. I don't know if you get too many Pac-12 fans though. They're not quite as obsessed with the Big 12
We do.
as you guys are
We do.
with us.
They come over, they hang out.